Dear brothers and sisters, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the different blessings that we have in our lives, the different good things that we love in our life, He also gave us, different tests and trials that we have to go through. And as the path to Jannah is very simple and it's very easy. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, what do I need to do to get into Jannah, or, to be accepted into this paradise that, you guys are talking about? And he said, you have to do Shahada. He said, okay, I give you the Shahada. I say the Shahada. And he was going through the pillars, and he said, then you have to do the 5 daily prayers unless you want to do extras. And he said, no, I'll do the 5 daily prayers and that's it. And they said, then I want to do, then you have to do the fasting Ramadan unless you want to do extra. And the man said, nope, I'll do the fasting Ramadan and that's it. And then he said, you give the zakah. And they said, no, I'll do the zakah and that's it. So he went through the 5 pillars, and the man would say, okay, I'm going to do the bare minimum and that's it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, if you want to see one of the people in Jannah, he said, look at this person, right? So although this person only did the basic, only did the minimum, the Prophet ﷺ told us, or gave us the sign that this is a person of Jannah, as long as they keep their promise or whatever that they agreed to do. So Islam in general is very simple. The path to Jannah is very simple and is very easy. So when we look at the different ahadith, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so many options and so many ways to lead us into this path. And we'll talk about a couple of hadith here. But the one thing to keep in mind is that we're all different. We all have good traits, we all have bad traits. We all have good things that we're able to do, things that make us easier for us to do. So as we said before, prayers may be easy for me and harder for somebody else. Fasting may be harder on me, but it'll be easier on somebody else. And the same thing with the different characteristics of human beings, the different characteristics of the believers as we go. In a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that the angels have, took the soul of a person from the people from, before you. So before the days of the Prophet ﷺ. So this person died, and the angels took his soul. So they asked him, they said, did you do any good in life? Did you do any good? He said, no. They told him, remember, did you do anything that was good in life? He's like, well, I used to, there's like, the guy was wealthy. So it's like, I used to loan people money. So if anybody needed help, if anybody needed some financial assistance, I would loan the person, and then I would tell my, my staff, if you will, the people that work for me, he says, if you find somebody that's going through hardship, then give them some time. Let them have their time until they repay me back. And he said, and if you find them that they don't, or they can't afford it, or they can't pay back anymore, he said, then just let it go. Just forgive their loan. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we shall forgive you. Just because that person was forgiving these people, just because that person was easy with these loans, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave that person. And at the beginning of the hadith, the angels asked that man, like, did you do anything good? So the guy was like, no, I really didn't do anything. And in different narrations about the same topic in the same hadith, the people or the angels will ask the person, did you do anything good? And the guy will say, no, I really didn't do anything good. So in their mind, they really didn't do anything good except for doing that one thing. And in different narrations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you forgave these people, if you let go because you wanted to let go, or you wanted to help those people, then we're better than, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, then I'm more generous than you, and I shall forgive you. Another narrations of the hadith, when the people, when the man would forgive, they say, I shall forgive these people, I shall forgive, their loans, in hopes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, you were doing this for this, then we shall forgive you. We are not more generous than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes we think about it, well, I really don't have much money to give, or I don't have this, or I don't have that. But we all go through different situations. We all go through different trials. We all go through different, things, different situations in our life that may put us in that situation. The situation of helping somebody. So when we do it, we have to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And distinct or separate what we love for this dunya to what we love for the hereafter. And that kind of takes us into the second hadith of how we have a relationship between ourselves. Between us and our siblings, us and our friends, us and our parents, our cousins, or, the people that we interact with on a daily basis. The Prophet ﷺ says, تفتح أبواب الجنة يوم الاثنين ويوم الخميس, that the gates of heaven open on Mondays and Thursdays. He says, فيغفر لكل عبد لا يشرك بالله شيئا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives for every servant of Allah that does not associate another God with him. He said, except إلا رجلا كانت بينه وبين أخيه شحناء فيقال انظروا هذا حتى, or except for two people that have two problems among each other. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, hold these two until they let go of their problems. Don't forgive these two people until they forgive each other. Now look at the situation that we're in. Imagine you are in that position where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the opportunity twice for our sins to be forgiven, but yet we stop ourselves from getting that forgiveness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the opportunity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the chance to forgive ourselves. And in another hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings two people and shows them this, this humongous house in Jannah, a humongous palace, very beautiful. So they ask, oh Allah, for what prophet, or who's the prophet or the shaheed, or who's really getting this house? And they say, no, this is not for anybody. This is for you, if you forgive each other. Now, how many times do we have problems with ourselves? How many times do we have problems with, our siblings, our relatives, our spouses, our uncles, our aunts, our co-workers? We all have problems. We all have issues. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ tells us we shouldn't be mad and upset with each other for more than 3 days. And he said the better person is the one that comes forward and starts to wanting to reestablish that relationship. I mean, can you imagine how much forgiveness we're withholding from ourselves? How much good we're stopping ourselves from getting because of what? And when you really go back to the main reason why we're upset with each other, it's very simple. It's very unneeded problem. Something very simple, but yet we let it get to us. We let it cause us so much problems. Think about how much or how many problems you have with people. And think about it, and I guarantee you, once we go through all these problems, we can probably forgive 70% or 75% of them without even thinking about it, realizing how stupid those problems are, and not wanting those problems to stop us from getting that forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another hadith, a man went to visit another guy in a village. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him a messenger in his path. So as this man is traveling, the messenger comes up to him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent. It's like, where are you going? It's like, I have a person I'm visiting in such and such village. He says, are you going for him? Are you going to visit him for something? Do you need something from him? Are you seeking something? And the guy says, no, I'm going to visit him just because I love him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the man, or the messenger, tells the man that, I am a messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you just because you're loving that person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just because that person loved the person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves him too. And we've talked about what happens when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. One of the most famous ahadith is that, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves a person, He calls in Jibreel and says, oh Jibreel, I love this person. So Jibreel loves that same person. And then Jibreel calls on Allah's creation in the heavens, the angels and everything else, and he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves this person, so you love him. So then everybody in the heavens loves that same person. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts blessings on that person on this dunya, on this earth. All of it because of what? Because he loved another human being for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for no other reason but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can we purify our intentions with the relationship that we have with our friends? I mean, you look around you in this masjid, and I know there are plenty of people that love each other just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for no other reason but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes we have that, personal benefit. We need something. Oh, I need him to help me with a job. I need to help him with this. I need him to help me with that. And we all need each other. I mean, there's a difference between, loving a person because you love him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then you need something from him, or you associate with that person because you have a benefit. So if anything, today or tomorrow or this weekend or this week, whenever you see those people that you love them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give them a hug and say, I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. Just establish that relationship with them and say, I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. So we can have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that blessing. So we can have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with us. All of those things are very simple. We just have to take the first initiative. In another hadith, in Muslim, the Prophet says, إن الله يقول يوم القيامة أين المتحابون بجلالي اليوم أظلهم في ظلي يوم لا ظل إلا ظلي. He says, where are those people that love me or that loved each other just for the sake of me? Not because of anything for this dunya, but they loved each other just for the sake of me. And today, I shall give them shade in the day when there's no shade but my shade, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Very simple, yet very powerful. In the summertime, when the sun is out, and for whatever reason you have to stand outside in the sun, I mean, we can barely stand it for 5 or 10 minutes, especially if the temperature is up in the hundreds or 110s or 20s. We can't stand it. So imagine having to stand on the day of judgment for hours and days and weeks and months and years, for who knows how long. On that day we're going to want any kind of shade that we can get. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what you have to do is love your fellow brother or love your sister for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's it. Very simple, yet very powerful. The results are so rewarding that sometimes you know how they say you have low-hanging fruit on everything that you do? Well, this could be a very low-hanging fruit when it comes to Islam, when it comes to dealing with your brothers and sisters. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. Ask God for forgiveness. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf min khalqillah, Sayyidina Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Dear brothers and sisters, as we said, these are very simple examples from things that we can do to help us when we have the final exam. These are the things that we can do to protect us from the problems that we're going to have on Day of Judgment. There's going to be a sun, and it's going to be hot. This is our chance to do this. And there are plenty of other examples. Visiting the sick in our community, just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've come to the point where we only visit the people that we know. If I know somebody, my cousin, my friends, my relatives, anybody that I my coworker, if they get sick and they end up going to the hospital or they need some help, then these are the only people that I help, or these are the only people that I care to go visit. But yet, if I don't know the person, then forget it. It's really not my problem. In a hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I got sick and you didn't visit me. So the person says, "Oh Allah, how can you get sick?" He said, "My servant got sick and you didn't visit him." We have plenty of people in our community that get sick and only get a visit from their immediate family or immediate relatives. Just think about doing it once, just for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because this is how we test ourselves. It's easy for me to go and visit, my relatives, my friends, my close friends, my family. It's kind of expected. Somebody gets sick, you go visit them right away. But when it's somebody you don't know, that shows you that you got to take an extra step. You got to stop, find something in your schedule, and go visit them. And you can only imagine the impact that makes on that sick person. Now, subhanAllah, somebody that doesn't know them came and visited them. And believe me, we have plenty of those people. So think about which one do you want to start with and do it. If you're going to go find somebody that you love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today or tomorrow or this weekend or any time, see them, shake their hand, give them a hug and say, "I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." Purify your intentions, purify your heart, and go to them. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you something that you're going to very direly need on the Day of Judgment. Dear brothers and sisters, if anything I said today that was right, then it's from the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if it was short, wrong, and complete, then it's from my own mistakes. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and then you the forgiveness. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا ميتا إلا رحمته ولا سائلا إلا أعطيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا إلى النار مصيرنا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة. Right, we all want to reach heaven. We all want to reach paradise. But right in the middle, we have this bump. We have this detour that we have to make. We have an issue that we have to deal with. And this issue is that transitional period between this life from the time the angel comes down to take my life out until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now we start judgment day. Now we start judging person by person. How can I prepare for this period? And what do I need to protect myself from that period to be part of those people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saves them from the punishment of the grave.